You couldn't really describe politely in company. A Home Secretary who seems quite keen on bringing back hanging, and somehow Dean Doris in charge of solving the social care crisis. It seems more important than ever to think about what really matters, I think, and to keep that stuff on the agenda, to look at the real issues facing the country and to keep the public's attention on them. I think a few things fit that bill more than what is happening to disability rights in Britain today. I think, we know that this decade in many ways has been crushing for so many disabled people. Ever since the coalition made that political choice to balance the nation's books off the back of the poorest and disabled communities, putting anything, tens of billions of pounds in anything from disability benefits, housing to social care. And we know 7 years later just what the impact of that has been. More disabled people queuing in food banks, more disabled people pushed off social security, more disabled people further isolated and stuck in the house, more disabled people with worsening health and mental health crisis. And I'm sure for a number of people, in this audience and listening and watching online, that this stuff isn't abstract. It's not just something that you read in the paper. It's our lives. And whether that's being put through a fit for work test, your PIP reassessment, having your social care reassessed, or trying to get your disabled child a school place and being told there just isn't one anymore. I think, over the last 7 years, I've lost count of the number of people that I've spoken to, or who have written to me, messaged me, tweeted me, even bothered to write handwritten old school letters to talk about the impact of this on their life, because it's been so, I think, brutal for so many people that there's that feeling of just wanting to talk to someone about it and wanting it put out there. And I think the overall feeling, I think, for me listening was always that these are people who were just about getting by before. They had disabilities, they had ill health, but they were staying healthy enough, they could see their friends and family sometimes, they had a decent quality of life, but who over the course of the last few years have found themselves in a position that they never thought they would be. Not being able to afford regular meals, not being able to get out of their house regularly anymore. And so Crippled has been out a few weeks now, and I think, when you release a book, you go through TV and radio, and people ask you these questions of, well, why did you write this book? Why is it important? Why does it matter? And for me, that's why really. I wanted to help put together a record, if you like, of what is actually genuinely happening in this country for disabled people. And I wanted more disabled people's voices to be heard in this conversation. We don't often, I think, get to tell our own stories. What we often get is quite a bit of silence and increasingly marginalised. We saw with Boris Johnson when he talked about the social care crisis when he first became Prime Minister. He pledged to address the social care system for people in old age, but as ever, completely ignored the hundreds of thousands of working age disabled people who rely on the service. Even an issue that so directly, fundamentally impacts disabled people's lives, was still so easily shut out from. And I think if disabled people are mentioned, it's often other people talking about us, and that often means disability is framed in a way that we wouldn't choose to do for ourselves, and generally does a pretty good job of keeping, disabled people in a certain negative place. I think over the decades, myths around disability, just like myths around poverty, they've been created to help maintain a certain status quo. And we've seen in recent years just how easy it is for ministers and certain sections of the media to adapt these myths to take a hammer to disabled people's rights. I think, against a backdrop of disenfranchisement, squeezed wages and this growing anti-welfare culture. Britain essentially witnessed this kind of emergence of what I call the undeserving sick, where not only is it that social and economic disadvantage is somehow a sign of personal failure, but so is being disabled or ill. And it's enabled, I think, that a person who needs, for example, social security to stay afloat, to be blamed for their apparent lack of effort, but also it legitimises the belief that this is a cost that the state no longer has to pay. And I think in this climate, too often, disabled people have been not perceived as fully fledged equal human beings and members of society, but some sort of underclass, lazy or deceitful. And it's combined, I think, in many ways, a class hatred and a revulsion of disability that has uniquely scapegoated disabled people in poverty. I think one of the most damaging myths around poverty has always been that it is somehow inevitable, that while some people enjoy life and fortune, there will always be others that can't even afford regular meals. I think that's particularly the case for disabled people, who I think we're routinely viewed in negative lights, whether that's passive or needy or just a bit tragic. And we get this message in the way that disabled people are often referred not as disabled people, but as the most vulnerable. I think we've heard this more and more in recent years, even amongst the left, where well-meaning voices often use phrases like, even in times of austerity, we must take care of the so-called most vulnerable. But of course, as we all know, disabled people, truth be told, aren't inherently vulnerable, contrary to the myth that so often surrounds disability. It's not inevitable for people with disabilities to be isolated or to be afraid or in crisis. Vulnerability comes when some politicians choose to pull support from disabled people in need, who need support to live dignified, fulfilling, independent lives. And they do that as a choice, knowing the misery it will cause. And I think watching Boris Johnson and his cabinet take power this month has felt, I think, to a lot of people as quite understandably a really dark moment in this country. And I think for anyone who is different, who looks different, who feels different, or who needs the state particularly to live a safe and a decent life, these moments can feel particularly scary. When you're reliant on the government to help you with really basic parts of life, like being able to afford food or being able to get yourself dressed in the morning or leave the house, watching governments turn down a path of individualism or incompetence or outright cruelty can feel particularly painful. But I think what we have to hold on to is that we know that every gain that the left has ever made in this country has come about through our own collective power. And disabled people have, of course, throughout the decades, organised to gain our rights. And as these rights are threatened afresh in this country, it is naturally going to be disabled people who are at the front and centre of that fight back. I think what we need more than ever is the left, disabled and non-disabled alike, to be our allies in this, to find increasing valuable ways to unite and to challenge the dodgy, damaging narratives that we have heard in recent years, and to build a positive, progressive vision for a better society for all of us. Because when disabled people lose our human rights, all of us ultimately lose our human rights. As disabled people struggle to pay the bills or get a safe and affordable home, all of us struggle for those basic rights, and all of us have to fight for those. I know that the people who are sitting here on a Saturday in this room or watching online are so instrumental in that message and that action. I hope that Crippled, as a book can play a small part in a much bigger picture of this rallying cry. Let's talk about it, let's tell a friend, let's tell an MP, let's pass it on, that disabled people in this country deserve so much better than this. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Francis. Sorry. Thank you, Francis. That was brilliant. That's what I just said. Yeah, that was brilliant. And we're going to come to the rest of the panel. But what I'd like to do now is welcome both John McDonnell, Shadow Chancellor, to the event, and also Marsha Cordova, Shadow Minister for Disabled People. And it'd be great to hear from you, Marsha. Thank you.
Hello everyone. I wasn't scheduled to say too much, but first let me just welcome you all. It's great to be here in central London on a Saturday afternoon discussing what we all know and believe to be an important issue. I want to congratulate you, Francis, for putting this book together, Crippled, and telling the story of so many people, giving light and giving us all the impact of what the Tory austerity regime has done to so many disabled people's lives going forward. What we've seen is coming on in 10 years of austerity, and we all know that disabled people have been hit hardest by all of this, whether it's independent living and social care to the breakdown of our social security system. Disabled people have been hit the hardest by this, and the evidence has been there and is there, whether it was the UN CRPD's report into this government, whether it was the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, highlighting the impact of austerity, whether it was the Equality and Human Rights Commission's own report on this government's austerity measures. The evidence is there, but this book gives that human impact and it tells the story, and it's great that we also have yourself here today to share your personal story. But Francis is absolutely right. We do need a social security system that is fit for purpose, a social security system that is a safety net for each and every one of us in our time of need if we need it. A social security system that is viewed in exactly the same light as our NHS system, as our National Health Service, that we all take pride in, and that we will all fight tooth and nail to keep free at the point of entry. And that is what our social security system must look like, and that is Labour's plan and vision, is to rebuild a social security system that is fit for purpose, and that is actually going to treat everybody, including disabled people, with dignity and respect. And that is why, as a movement, we focus on the social model of disability, because it's not us, but it's society around us that disables us from actually fully and equally participating. So thank you for inviting me along this afternoon. I'll be here for a few more minutes, and I understand John's in the room. I can't see back there, but if he is here, it's great to see you as well, John. But thank you so much, and a huge thank you to DPAC for leading the fight of direct action and campaigning, because you guys have ensured that the voices of disabled people are being heard and continue to be heard. So thank you.
Thank you, and again, just like to say how great it is to have, such a significant representatives of our government in Vasey here. Now I'm going to pass on to Paul Atherton, who's actually one of the case studies featured in Francis's book. Good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon, thank you. And thanks so much for having me today. Now, I'm the Paul that's mentioned in the housing chapter in Francis's book. So I'm one of the two case studies talking about the housing issue. Now, I've been homeless for 10 years now. I lost my home through a credit file error back in 2009. And then I've been through a catalogue of adventures, through No Second Night Out over in Goldhawk Road, through homeless hostels, through night shelters, through living in a car, and now I reside pretty much at Heathrow Airport in Terminal 5. Now, the existence that I lead is, for most people, very abstract, because where I sleep is just where I sleep. and I continued my days as I would anybody else. I have chronic fatigue syndrome, which I was diagnosed with when I was 20, when I was in university, and I've been struggling with that the entire time, and that varies from me being completely compos mentis, as I am today, to being immovable and unable to talk. So during this period of time, the welfare system, and it was interesting that people still call it Social Security, you know, because obviously there was a rebranding exercise that various governments decided, and we lost the wonderful Department of Health and Social Security to be turned into the Department of Work and Pensions. And that language, I think, is really important to remember. It's a constant shift in, we're not here to support you, we're here to force you into some kind of work. You're just an economic product, not a human being. But the biggest irony for me was that I actually used to work for the Department of Health and Social Security as was. So I was 17, 18, and I quit there because they were treating their claimants so appallingly. So it's been sort of a consistent thing. But I find myself in a very odd irony at the moment, is that I've been struggling to get the DWP to do the simple thing of email. And they refused to email. And it took me a 2-year court process through judicial review. In February of this year, they finally agreed that yes, we will email people with disabilities. And in the evidence in that court, only 32 people, myself included, in the entire of the UK have been granted that right as a disabled person to be able to communicate in a method that works for me. So we have a welfare system that is, as everybody knows, is designed to keep oppressing everybody, taking away your fundamental rights, taking away the money just to be able to live. And it surprises me that how sort of flippant this has come about. And obviously the attacks have been, as people say, it's been, I mean, I feel like it's been 2 decades worth, actually. For me, the big problem started in 2009, obviously when I lost my house. And then I found myself in the bizarrest of situations where my benefits were stopped because I couldn't attend medical because I was homeless, and they sent the medical appointment to a residential address I hadn't lived for 5 years. But the fact that I didn't turn up at that appointment meant they stopped all my benefits. I'm in the weirdest position that I now, all my benefits have stopped again literally this morning. I've been 8 months waiting for an appeal date to get my incapacity benefit reinstated. The disability living allowance has been stopped, because I'm still on the legacy benefit, have been stopped because for exactly the same reason, because they didn't have the staff to do a home visit, and therefore they said, well, here's an appointment 35 miles away, you didn't turn up at that. It's not our fault we didn't have the staff. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it is. It's not. But that doesn't come in. But of course, we go through this ridiculous, expensive process. So now I'm back being destitute. I have absolutely no funds coming in whatsoever. The court hearing should have been passed through in February of this year. My DLA went to a mandatory reconsideration because I'm still waiting on a judgment from the court to say whether these things should progress, and they decided that they're just going to stop all my benefits. So the likelihood of me getting any more benefits for at least another 4 months is pretty slim. Now, what the state or the government or society expects you to do to survive these periods, I have no idea. And I think this is one of the worst things that you kind of go, as a human being, just as a human being, ignore politics, but just as a human being, why would you inflict that pain and suffering and degradation on another human being? It's incomprehensible to me. I certainly wouldn't do it to someone else, and I don't understand why people do it today. But I was very honoured to be asked to be included. I was very lucky to have connected to Francis via Twitter, which is, of course, so without social media, half of us wouldn't be in this room.
That's right.
So it's the one upside, and one of the things that I do, which has made the bane of my life with the DWP, is that because I'm homeless, most of my time is spent out. And they don't really comprehend this. So when I missed an appointment, I actually tweeted, I'm stuck in a cafe, I can't move. They said, but you were out. And I'm like, well, what's in? It's like, I don't have a house. What? You know, if I'm in a coffee, that's in. That's me in somewhere. And they were like, no, this proves that you were able to get someone. I was like, yeah, but it says I was trapped here for 7 hours. I could not move for 7 hours. That's what it says in the tweet. And they still try to use that tweet in the court to prove that I was capable to move. So this is the culture that we're in, this is the attitude that we're having to address, and hopefully Crippled will at least start the conversation, because I think we've lost that idea of conversing and uniting together as a society. We've become isolated, partly I think actually ironically through the internet. But I'm starting to see groups like this everywhere. I was at the Representing Homelessness conference last week in Lincoln speaking, and it was interesting to see that even the Daily Mail is now actually reporting on homelessness, saying it's a systemic problem rather than, oh, that's a homeless person, that's his fault. And I think that at least gives us a little bit of hope.
Thank you, Paul. I think it's a come from very profound truth. Certainly from my own experience, if I may just say, one of the things you're explaining to my neighbours, for instance, who are lovely, who are stunned by the fact that I have to go through the benefit system. Because when they first possibly voted for this austerity measures, they thought it wouldn't affect people like me. It would only affect the scroungers. So when I tell them of all the hoops, and I think exactly what you pointed to, is it now feels that when we apply for benefits, it is no longer about what you need. When you apply for benefits now, you don't have to prove what your needs are. You actually have to prove you are a disabled person, even before you get to letting them know what your requirements are. Anyway, I'm sure there'll be lots of people in the room and on Twitter who put similar stories. Now I'd like to come over to Aditya. Welcome, Aditya.
Thank you. I'd like to start by just saying a few words about Frances. I've never met her, but I've been a huge fan of hers for years. And in fact, our editor at the paper can attest to this, because when she would bring me up and say, well, what are you thinking about writing tomorrow? I'd always say, Frances was very good this week, wasn't she? And that makes me sound incredibly collegial, but let me dispel that notion. Because actually, I've been reading these pieces by Frances, and I'm thinking, goodness me, she's evidently fairly new to the paper, and probably perhaps to journalism. She's obviously young, and she's got doctorates on top of all of that. And I found it utterly galling, of course. Very, very unfair. But I do keep reading Frances and keep cheering her on as she goes up all the prizes that I know she'll be getting over the course of time. Quite rightly. She does something very rare in journalism, which is in the paper she writes these reported columns. And you may say, well, what are reported columns? How are they different from any other kind of column? Well, what a reported column at its best tries to do is to take the story of a person like Paul and pay real attention to the details of his life and to what he says, to pay him the respect of listening to him, and from that to try and make an argument about the kind of situation he's in, and to show why it's not all Paul, it's not all his fault, there is actually a wider system here. And actually, there are very few places in journalism now where you get reported columns. They're expensive to do, they take much more time. They often involve, I'm sure Frances will test this, they often involve a bit of argy-bargy with the DWP or the council or whoever. And so if you look across the newspapers on any given day, you don't find very much in the way of reported columns. Most columnists approach evidence the way a drunkard approaches a lamppost. Really, the evidence is only there for support, to guide you towards your journey's end, rather than because you want to actually listen and think about what the person is telling you. And one of the great pleasures of listening to Paul just then was he was exactly as I would imagine him to be from the book. And that's a real testimony to Frances' skill in conveying it. In that I knew from reading about him that he had great strength of mind, that he had an articulacy and a self-perception, and all of that I think was on display just then in the remarks Paul made. I've done a bit of reported column writing, but I come at it from a slightly different angle, slightly different approach, in that I write mainly about economics for my newspaper. And I'm particularly interested in the issue of political economy. Now, political economy is a very grand name for something quite simple, which is who gets what. or as someone from long ago said, hoo-hoo. And this decade has been a textbook example of seeing political economy at its crudest. Because while all the things that Francis and Mandy all have been talking about, the stripping away of benefits, the hoops you have to jump through just to get what is in the end a fairly risible sum of money from the government. The government has been handing money hand over fist to some of the people who least need it in our society. You will all know that corporation taxes in this country, that is taxes on big businesses, have shrunk to a historic low. We are near island levels. In fact, corporation tax in this country is below where the corporations themselves would like it to be. Because there was a certain point at which corporation tax dropped below a threshold, and I noticed that the mouthpiece of big business, the CBI, had stopped calling for corporation tax to go any lower. So George Osborne, when he was Chancellor, kept giving them extra money. And there's an academic at York University who took just 1 year, I think it was 2014, one financial year, and he worked out in that 1 year alone, the taxpayers, all of us in Britain, had handed over £93 billion in what he called corporate welfare, which is everything from direct grants, subsidies, soft loans, other means of support to corporations. So never forget, when we asked them to defend exactly what Paul said, this change in language where it becomes welfare, it's always welfare for those people who are deemed they have to work very hard to deserve it. But when it comes to corporations, they have their own form of corporate welfare. They don't have to justify it to anyone. The point I'd like to make is we are at an inflection point, I think, in this system of in this kind of political economy of funneling money towards those already right at the top. We've been through decades of seeing this. In fact, over the course of my lifetime, I'm 44, over the course of my lifetime, we've seen an entire economy reduced to a bet on a single sector, just 2 miles down the road from here, the city. And we've seen the country reduced to being a bet on a single city, this one. And in fact, not even all of London, but just the centre of London, right? Because the centre of London is apparently all that really matters. And since Francis has already opened up a war of words with Boris Johnson, I would remind you, Boris Johnson is the one who said a pound spent in Streatham is worth more than a pound spent in Strathclyde. Now, you can say that's just Boris being Boris, that's what he always says, he's always jokey, he was a mayor of London at the time. But actually, he has a journalist's ability to sum up, to clarify exactly what the prevailing ideology of the time is. And that one sentence tells you a lot about how this government and the party which has been in power for most of this decade, how they view the country as a whole. Certain people, certain places in Britain matter more than others. My contention would be that the people in this room, perhaps the people who are watching, we're not considered to be among those who matter. If you are a poor person in central London, you will be an expert witness in the fact that central London no longer feels like it's really a home for you, that you're hanging on in there. If you live in a suburb of London, and I grew up, born and brought up in an out suburb of London where I still live, you will have seen the life sucked out of it over the course, not just of this decade, but decades previous. And if you live elsewhere in the country, apart from a few of the big cities, you will see most of the young people, most of the money flow down south. I want to just end by giving a little bit of thought to what lies ahead. We've got a very new Prime Minister. He's been in office for just a few days, and it already looks like we are shaping up for some kind of general election. Whether it's the kind of thing where he says, I can't get my no-deal Brexit or my hard Brexit deal through Parliament, so I'm going to go back to you, the people, and you give me a mandate to give you a hard Brexit. Or whether he actually does manage to get this thing through and then turns around to the people and says, I've done it, now give me my mandate. It looks very likely that we're heading for some kind of general election combined with a hard Brexit, a very hard Brexit. You've already seen in the past few days the kind of priorities that this government has, and they speak directly to the theme I've been talking about. So you've got possibly a no-deal Brexit, which would vaporise what's left of the manufacturing sector in this country. You've got talk about a point-style immigration system, which would be an equivalent basically treating everyone, not just immigrants, but people who look like they might be immigrants because they're a different hue, as if they're somehow on sus, as if they're second-class citizens within this country. And you've also got all of the stuff about free ports that you might have noticed coming up this, in the past few days, which is an attempt basically to create low tax, low regulation zones within the country that undermine the rest of the economy. That's just within a few days. These people have got a plan for what the country should look like, being no doubt about that. It's not all about clowning around and Jacob Rees-Mogg looking slightly ridiculous in the corner. They've got a very serious plan, and it involves effectively concentrating the resource of this country, our resources, into the pockets of the few. And I think Francis' book speaks directly to that as a example of how austerity and how the politics of the narrowing down, the defining down of this country so only a few people matter, then excludes groups. In her case, she concentrates on disabled people. But the point I'd like to make is it's not just disabled people. It's people who live in suburbs. It's people who live in towns. It's people who work three jobs in a week and still don't get enough to get by. It's lots and lots of people across the country. In fact, perhaps now I would say, perhaps the majority of us. But it's the most pernicious achievement of this government that they've made us all feel that actually it's us against them, it's me on my own, it's dog eat dog. So they've stripped out any sense of collectivism to that struggle, and it's our job to try and take it back. And I really salute Frances because I think she's done a major part of that job in this book.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aditya. I think it's really important that we see what's happening and what has happened to our community, that was just definitely disabled people, as part of the wider picture. Because also, we're not only just disabled people, we are people who live in the suburbs, where we become convinced, immigrants, we're parents, we're homeowners or not, we're tenants or not, have homes or are homeless. So, we are part of that broader picture as well as looking at the focus today of us as our experiences as disabled people. So now, we're going to throw the floor open, whatever that means. Don't worry, it doesn't mean a deep chasm. We're going to go. And in fact, also, as well as the people in the room, we may have some questions, I think, via Twitter, on the social feed. Sorry?
During the monitoring questions.
We have?
We've got a second live stream going.
We
are monitoring the questions. Yes.
Two.
Okay. Well, if someone could just tell me when there's a question, that would be great. However, I do see somebody with their hand raised, so thank you, Ellen. Hi.
Hi everyone, it's Claire from WinVisible here. Thank you very much, Francis. I wondered if you would like to comment more about disabled women, which is one focus in your book, and how disabled single mums have borne the brunt of the worst of the austerity, and that's something that we've dealt with in our day-to-day work, where disabled single mums are denied benefits because of being found fit for work by virtue of looking after children, but at the same time not getting support, via the Care Act, not getting support as mums, having children taken away, and the rest of it. And we feel strongly that we are entitled to a living wage, because the way that society is set up, we're made, coping with disability is very hard work in a hostile environment, and we are entitled to a living wage for that. And also that the family carers who are involved, how they are treated is a measure of the respect for us as well. and our rights can't be won without their rights being recognised as well. So I just wondered if you'd like to comment about that, about women.
Did you get that, Francis?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, what's your organisation yourself? You're into your work.
WinVisible.
WinVisible.
Sorry.
Sorry, it's WinVisible, Women with Visible and Invisible Disabilities, like invisible with a W on the front.
Yes. Right, so yeah, I think one of the things with, when we talk about disability, is too often we don't talk about the intersection with other points of inequality, whether it's race or sex or whatever. I think that's one reason why in the book I wanted to talk about those issues, because I think we talk a lot, or at least non-disabled women often refer to the impact that austerity has had on women, quite rightly. You know, I think the House of Commons research was 86% of the burden of hit women. And then, of course, as we know as disabled women, that if you combine that with also having health conditions or disabilities yourself, or caring responsibilities that so often fall onto women as unpaid labour, all of that becomes a sort of a hit from both sides. And I think it's hugely important to think about that. I think when it comes to the social care crisis, for example, I think we talk often, I know I do, about the way that we need to put disabled people into the conversation as well as older people. But I think another really important part of that we probably don't talk about enough is the role of women taking unpaid labour. I think that, and that's various issues, but one that stands out for me is definitely, I think there's an assumption that women take on labour and that's a inevitable part of society, and that we don't have to support women, we don't have to support mothers, for example, who care for their disabled children into adulthood for 40 years at the expense of their own health. That there of course is a natural thing to do in many ways, is debilitating physically, mentally and financially. And I think as a society we fail starkly in how we support unpaid carers in this country, expecting people to do incredibly difficult work, often 24/7, living on a pittance that the state provides. And I think one issue is the social care system inevitably creeps on over the next few years, is to really look at the way that we are increasingly expecting disproportionately women to take on that burden when the state is increasingly abandoning families. And we need to talk about that in terms of disability, and we need to talk about it in terms of class, but I think we really need to talk about it in terms of gender as well, because that's a hugely relevant part of it.
Thank you, Francis. It's very significant to know that, many of women who are carers are also disabled women themselves. So, John, I see, I'd like to pass my phone to John McDonnell, Shadow Chancellor. Thank you, John, and staunch ally always.
It's not so much a question, it's just a thank you, Francis, thank you for the book, but also thank you for the articles that you've done in The Guardian over that period. We've had a real struggle of getting the message out about what the impact of the last 9 years of austerity had. To be honest, you've been one of those bright lights that we've relied upon to get the information out there. And when we set up DPAC, there are a number of people who originally set up DPAC are no longer with us because of the austerity measures. Some of them took their own lives as well. And I think the more we share the examples of what's gone on and what these Tory, the language actually, what they've done to us over the last 9 years is important. I'll just give one further example. 2 weeks ago I sat for an hour and a half, 2 hours virtually, with the saint called Helen Loder, who runs my office, and we were at a social care assessment with the young woman who looks after her mum, and her mum lay beside us in a what is effectively a hospital bed in the front room. And this young woman has been caring for her mother for the last few years, and we've been trying to support her. We went through the assessment, and there was an assessment by a nurse and a social worker, and they were wonderful. They did everything they possibly could, but they're constrained by the system. I just give one example. Is if you score high if you score low on cognition, that's one criteria, you automatically score low on emotional distress. Because you can't be emotionally distressed if you haven't got the cognition. So if it's the other way round, if you have emotional distress, you score high on cognition, and on that basis you don't qualify. And it's that sort of entrapment of the system itself that's taken place, whereby you literally get access to support. It's become, well, it isn't just a postcode lottery, it's worse than that, because there are no postcodes really where you get access to support on the basis of need anymore. It's on the basis of a very strict rationing that has become increasingly brutal. And what your book does, and I'm so grateful for it, and I said it should shape the foundations of our society, it exposes the brutality that's been inflicted upon us over the last 9 years. Now, Brexit, I know, is an important issue. Of course it is. It's one of the most significant issues we face. But I think Brexit's being used, actually, in the political debate to prevent the discussion of all the other issues that we need to confront. And it's all well and good Boris Johnson coming along spraying money here, there and everywhere on pet projects and other issues as well. But it's interesting, in all the discussion so far, he's mentioned nothing about social security, and he's mentioned nothing about disabled people in any of the announcements or discussions that he's had. And I think that reflects, exactly as Aditya has said, that reflects their priorities and the direction in which they're travelling. And I think the good thing about your book, it puts the issue back on the agenda. It gives us another piece of ammunition that we can use through DPAC and elsewhere in campaigning, but also actually in the development of policies. And you've heard from, as has been said, the development of policies that we need to have. And it isn't about lifting people out of poverty or protecting people from poverty. It's about giving people and allowing people to determine that they themselves have a decent quality of life. And I think the last sentence of your book is the one that I seized upon in the various things I've been saying. I just said, this is it. The rallying cry for our times is clear. How things are is not how they need to be. And I think that's what we should do, trying to get across to people more and more on the basis of the work that you've done, both in your book and your articles. It doesn't have to be like this. And our job now is to make sure it isn't. And if only in memory of a lot of our colleagues that we've lost over this last 9 years. So thanks for what you've done.
Thank you, John. That's a good starting round, so for just, what is happening and how it has always been a choice. And this has been nothing to do with our choice. It's been something that's been imposed on. I believe we have another question.
Oh, hello. My name's Vasey. Social care is a big issue for me, and I've recently become involved with an organisation called Reclaim Social Care. Just like to say, I'm really keen to make, links with DPAC and, everybody. But one thing that strikes me about since I've been involved with Reclaim Social Care, I learned, because it has produced a really really rigorously thought out paper about the cost of social care. And I'll freely admit, I was a number amongst people I used to who thought social care was expensive. But we've got to pay for it. Well, I've learned recently that social care really pays for itself. And I'm not going to even attempt to, explain how that works quite, but it is, as it stands, only about 2% of GDP, and is basically, if social care were functioning well, it would be a success story all round. It would, you know, as we've already said, you know, the people who are giving free care, and mainly women, are, you know, all these situations would be improved. So I'm just wondering, really, you know, how do we? And I don't think this is understood. You know, that social care is not a big, giant, scary expense. And how do we get that message across? You know, how do we do that? That's something that's really bothering me.
Okay, would like to. Anyone?
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I think the issue is the same as the housing issue. So there is an organisation called Housing First, and they've been very successful across the planet at the moment, because they're making the argument that actually having homeless people is more expensive than giving that homeless person a house and all the necessary support that they need. And Housing First are very, very effective in doing that, because they've got a single message that even the Republicans in America have now taken out, because they can argue it on a financial basis. And I think the key with social care is exactly the same argument. I think you have to go, right, there's no point trying to empathise, there's no point trying to get sympathy, there's no point trying to do anything. Let's just give it you in cold, hard financial facts, that it is more efficient to provide social care to the people who've got the right support, that they're not going back and forth out of hospital, they're not putting a strain on other things. Because ultimately, what's needed is actually, as I said earlier, you know, we need to sort of unite as a society, but until that happens, they're only interested in the bottom line. So show them the bottom line. The bottom line is more effective to pay for social care, and they can't argue with that. There is no argument against it. It is more cost effective in exactly the same way as Housing First.
Thank you, Paul. It seems to me that what we need is like almost like a rebranding from welfare to social investment, actually, because actually what we're talking about is investing with individuals, because as Paul talked about, and as everyone's kind of mentioned it previously, you know, one of the things about investing in disabled people, it's not just about investing in us so we can, you know, we can get dressed, we can get up in the morning, but the fact that we can then get dressed and get up in the morning means that we can actually go to work and earn money and become taxpayers, if that's available to us. It may not be available to everybody, but that choice has then been opened to many of us as well. So it is, you know, we're not a bottomless pit, which is, I think, unfortunately the perception that social care has had, Sean, as you mentioned, but it's actually about social investment. Francis, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think social investment is a really great term. I might steal that. I think that's what it is. I think one of the biggest ironies of austerity, and generally how the Tories like to present themselves, is that Labour is the party of waste, and the Tories are the sensible, you know, pulling economic geniuses. Well, of course, any basic addiction will know far more than me, as I can't really count. But I think that austerity is one of the starkest examples of how terrible it has been financially. The utter waste of, you know, not building social housing and having to pay, you know, millions for putting families in temporary accommodation, cutting social care that leaves disabled people sicker and more isolated, and therefore not only going through horrific experiences, but in brutal terms, costing the state significantly more than we would have done to begin with. But, you know, I saw people who have had their mobility cars removed because they've had their pit stopped, and they can't get to work anymore and pay tax. It makes no economic sense. And I think one of the strengths from Labour in recent years has been, and I think for all of us on the left, is that double argument, if you like, that we continually have to talk about it in human terms, that we don't speak about single people in the way that the right so often do, that we're just, you know, what we can economically contribute, that to make the case that as human beings we are so much more than that. But at the same time, to say realistically, you know, it is not cost effective to cut It is not sensible. It is economic madness to gut the state in multiple ways. It will only cost us more, and we're seeing more and more that is the case. And actually, the left have the sensible economic ideas. These so-called radical solutions are just common sense. They're humane, and they're also much more economically viable than the complete waste that we've seen in recent years.
Yeah, just to pick up on the Francis point and your point, which I thought was excellent. I've been reading a book by an American sociologist called Palaces for the People, by a guy called Eric Kleinenberg, and it's all about what he calls social infrastructure. And that's a fancy term for things that we all know: libraries, youth clubs, community centres, daycare centres, this kind of thing. But he calls them social infrastructure as a way of using the language of hard infrastructure, which we know that Boris and George Osborne like, right? Because Boris loves Garden Bridge, right? And he loves an island that can be named after him. And George Osborne loves to go up to the north and wear a high-vis jacket and a hard hat because it makes him feel a bit more manly. So I think it's really important to think about these things, as you're saying, to talk about them as essentials, but also to be aware that they are parts of our vital social structure. And one of the things that Paul talked about, the Housing First, starts with that. The great thing about Housing First is it just starts from basic premise. Under UN law, we're all entitled to a home. So let's just act as though we're all entitled to a home. And let's say that the problem with homelessness isn't a lack of money, isn't a lack of inability to keep a drink. It's actually a very fact that these people don't have homes. Were they to have homes, they could order their lives a bit better, and they might therefore be able to play more of a role in society. And as you know, Paul, one of the countries that's really taken up is Finland. Finland, the winters there are so punishing that if you're street homeless, you die. Right? So they don't really have much of a choice about it. So they build the homes. They've done this huge house building project, of which Housing First is part, and it's practically killed the problem of homelessness in Finland. That's incredible. What if we were to take the same feat of imagination to our social care system, which everyone from whichever party now admits is in dire crisis, and just say, well, what are the things that we deem essential to our lives? Surely dignified care for everyone is part of that. So I think that's a really excellent point. And see them as social investment or social infrastructure, as this guy writes about in his book, I think is a really useful tool.
Thank you. John, would you just remind us the name of the kind of
organisation?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a new campaign. It's called Reclaim Social Care.
Do you have a Twitter or a Facebook that people can connect with?
Maybe.
I'm trying to make it more clear.
No, thanks, Mandy. It has, I've tried to start up a local group, well, I have started up a local group in Ealing, and we've got a Facebook. Just trying to think what it's called, Reclaim Social Care West London. There is a kind of central group of people working on it in kind of, in the Midlands area, basically. And that's it.
Reclaim Sock Care.
Oh yeah.
I think on Twitter it's Reclaim Sock Care.
Reclaim Sock Care.
Reclaim Sock Care is on Twitter if anybody wants to look at that in the future. Thank you, John. Thank you. And our next question.
Hi, I'm Faiza, Shaheen. The organisation I run, Sensible Aid and Social Services Stop Here, upstairs here, and I'm also running against Ian Smith in the next So I've just come from canvassing, which is partly why I'm late, and we're very, very motivated to beat him, and partly because of this, and because I saw my mum go through this, in her reassessments, and unfortunately she died 2 years ago. But in cleaning up her house, one of the most depressing things was finding all of the letters just all of the admin in her last few years of life that she had to do to fight for her benefits, to fight for social care. And it was just heartbreaking. And, you know, unfortunately, since I've said I'm going to run, I get letters and emails and messages on Twitter all the time, you know, and it's horrific. And I've just come from canvassing, and I have to say there's so much support. People are so motivated to get in touch with us. There's like a general election now, as we get like, you know, 20 people coming out. Last week in the pouring rain, we had 20 people come out. And I've just come, there was a woman that fell on the street whilst we were out canvassing this morning, and frail lady, she just wanted to go to the shop. She fell on the street, we had to sit with her. The ambulance didn't come, I think it just came, my husband just texted me to say. And we were talking to her, someone comes just twice a week, she clearly needs more support, she hasn't got family. And absolutely that point about social care and the investment, the social investment, and ultimately that's cost the state much more. And that woman, this poor lady has gone through the trauma of falling in the street. I mean, she was like, don't worry, just leave me here on the street. I mean, you know, it's so upsetting. So just a couple of things. One thing is on the state. So we just did some research at class with the Runnymede Trust, looking at working class lives. And the big thing that came out when we heard it, I heard it a bit today, was that unfortunately, because of the way in which policy has been put through and the values of the people making those policies has been put through the state, the state has been seen as a punitive arm, really. And for many of the people that we interviewed, working class, and there wasn't a big proportion that were disabled, but you know, generally we're dealing a lot with housing associations and the job centre. They saw the state as a problem. And now this is something that we have to think about on the left, because of course partly it's about lack of money, but unfortunately it's also about a culture, and a culture that has developed. And I'm not blaming the civil servants, you know, and those frontline workers, because they are incentivised in certain ways really to bring out, you know, to forget about the compassion, to forget about humanising. And so it's something that we need to think very seriously about, how we change the culture, not just more money, but also a different set of principles and values. And then secondly, one thing that really strikes me, even running in the area, so I'm running where I grew up, Megedzi and Duncan Smith, is how few people know about this. How few people know about the experiences of people, and how few people know what the Tories have done, and specifically what their MP has done. And it's difficult for me, because I don't want to run a negative campaign, of course we're making a positive case as to why they should vote for me. But, you know, Francis's work, which I've followed for a long time, and others in this room who I know, you know, come down and do sometimes stunts in the street. There's a lot more we need to do for people to understand and realise just how cruel the state has been, and just any ideas on what we can do to just really heighten that awareness. And you know, several of us, I have a media platform. You know, what more can we be doing and saying whenever we get that opportunity? Thanks.
Thank you. And so I think I'll probably speak to everyone here on the side. Good job. Just wanted to ask, do we have any questions via social media, or where we've taken them all from the room? We don't?
No.
Okay, that's fine then. And we're here is done. Do we have any more questions? I know we're looking to finish around 3:30, is that right, Sarah? Yeah, but we think we probably have time for one or two. And also I'd just like to offer Francis, Aditya, on all the opportunity to some closing words. Thank you, Claire.
Just a quick addition on the social care discussion is that Hammersmith and Fulham abolished care charging from April 2015, which was a combination of a fantastic local campaign with Hammersmith and Fulham Coalition Against Charging, HAFCAG, and the Labour opposition being persuaded by the disability activists, including Debbie Dawn, who's no longer with us, Kevin Caulfield, some people may know. I think it's worth really looking at what Hammersmith and Fulham is doing. They have a whole set of social policies. They abolished bailiffs for council tax and other debts, and they do negotiation now. They're piloting universal free school meals. That is not just free school meals for low-income children, but for all children. So there's no stigma attached to it, and a lot of other things. So they really deserve a spotlight on what they're doing. They did it despite a 50% cut in government grant, and they did it by looking across their budget. For example, they renegotiated contracts where the Tories had sold off cheap property developments, and they asked for more money from the developers and stuff like that. So, you know, they've really been creative.
Thank you, Flynn. I mean, I think it's really important, isn't it? You know, we live in interesting times according to the Chinese case. You know, we're here in the discussion and within all of our daily lives dealing with, you know, the impact and the absolute brutality of what's happening. But we all are here because we know and we want to contribute to a way forward that actually produces, you know, a society that we know can exist, that is positive, that is facilitative to everybody, and that reaps the benefits of that. Francis, I'd just like to ask if you had any closing comments that you'd like to make.
Sorry, was that for me?
Yeah, sorry, Francis. I just
Sorry.
wanted to say anything in closing.
Yeah, I think, firstly, massive thank you to everyone who came and put so much work into this. I know these things take a lot of logistical, despite being alone. I mean, it was remarkable. But no, genuinely, so much thank you to everyone who took the time to be on the panel, to organise it, and for you guys for coming. It means so much. I think these things, they're really sometimes grim topics. I think one of the things I'm completely telling people is that I'm a genuinely cheerful person. I'm really sorry. But a lot of it is, this is quite bleak. But you know what? Days like today, I find genuinely optimistic. I find being in these rooms and listening to people the most optimistic and empowering and hopeful part of it, because I think often, you know, you read the news, you see what's happening, and you feel a bit hopeless and powerless. But I think it's afternoons like this, whether it's like, you know, bringing your canvassing to try and get rid of IBS, or you're going to these sort of events. These are the moments where you feel like actually you're not alone, you want something better, and you know that even in those difficult times, there is, you know, it sounds trite, but there is genuine hope around the corner, because when people like yourselves are turning up on a Saturday afternoon to talk about these issues, we know that on, you know, the Labour movement, the left has the collective power to make things better. And I feel that these are the moments where you know that together we will eventually get there. I feel optimistic about that. I think that there's that sense of hope, and you know, the gains that we've always had have always been, you know, under threat, but have always been achieved through the efforts and power of people just like in this room. And I hope you leave today feeling that bit of optimism, that bit of hope that together we can hopefully get this country back on track to get those bloody Tories out and something better.
I was going to ask the panel members to have any closing remarks, but actually I'm going to flex my cheering muscles and just say I actually think that that's where we need to close. I'd like to thank all the panel, Aditya and Paul for their fantastic contributions. I'd like to thank Marsha for his, I'd like to thank John McDonnell for his, and actually always been here with us and always been present. And ultimately, I just want to say thank you so much, Francis, both for your work and for the, you know, just the joy of bringing the opportunity for us all to get together, to have such a, you know, a tough, but I think, as you said, really empowering discussion today. So, Francis, cheers to you, love.